Morning, guys. This is going to be today's project. I'm going to build a second bow stand. Now, the point of this is it's kind of heavy, so it's not going to tip over, but it's portable enough that I can move it around in the yard and I can shoot from different distances without having to have like a hook or a stake stuck in the ground to hang my bow from at all of the different distances I want to shoot from. So I can move this around with me. It's actually got two hooks, so you could hang two bows on it at the same time. You and a friend could shoot, you and a kid or a wife or whatever, whoever you shoot with. And then it's got arrow storage built into the base of it. I built this one yesterday off camera to make sure I had kind of the design right, the sizes right. I'm actually going to shrink it a little bit from this. This is kind of overkill. But then I was also doing it to learn the new tool that I was using. So let's jump over to the welder real quick. This is the Firstis MP200 by Yes Welder. Now, this is not sponsored by them, but they did send it to me to play with. If you are interested in one at all, there is a link down below. Go and check them out, but let me tell you about it real quick. I've been welding since high school, off and on, but it's been 25 years or more since the last time I used a wire feed, a MIG welder. I've been using a very, very old stick or arc welder for quite some time now, and as it turns out, I'm just bad at it. With this one, I hadn't used a wire feed in 20 years more, and as soon as I fired it up and made my first weld, I went, oh, turns out I'm not so bad at this. So a good tool kind of goes a long way towards that. But the reason this thing is cool is that it is a MIG or wire feed, it is a TIG welder, it is a arc or stick welder, and a plasma cutter. So it can do a whole bunch of different things just by switching some stuff in the settings and switching a few locations, mostly for the ground wire, the different tools that you're going to use. So very cool. Go check them out. Also, I jumped on Amazon and found this cheap little rolling welding cart with a couple of drawers for storing all the different parts and stuff. I needed some way to store this thing, so I grabbed this one off of Amazon. I'll leave a link for that as well. The other part of this is kind of turning into a getting started welding sort of tutorial almost. Like I said, I've been welding for a long time, but I've always used welders that were already set up. It was just go turn it on and go weld. I didn't have to think through the infrastructure of it. So setting up a welder for the first time was interesting, and getting the shielding gas for the first time was interesting. I looked around, there's all sorts of places that you can do this with, but there were like memberships or bottle rentals or this or that, and I didn't know what I needed, and I didn't even know what the right questions to ask were. So I felt kind of dumb going into a place where all these guys are professionals at this. So I ended up just going to our local, it's a chain of farm and fleet stores called Mills Fleet Farm. Really like that store. And went to their welding section and just started looking at stuff. And eventually I found a big sheet of different shielding gas that they had in stock in the back. And you just have to type a code into a computer, prints out a ticket, go check out with that ticket, you drive around back, and they throw a bottle in there for you. Now, since I didn't have one, it was all kinds of expensive. I think I paid $285 for this 40 cubic foot. I believe that's the measurement of it. It's the second smallest size that they make. $285 for it because I had to also pay for the tank. But now that I own the tank, if I need to refill it, it is $45, and it works just like a propane tank exchange at a gas station. I just take this back to the store, type in a different code, get the ticket, pay for it, drive to the back, hand them the empty one, they give me a full one, and I go home and start doing this again. The other thing was I couldn't find a regulator at any of the stores. I didn't know what I needed that would work with the bottle, that would work with the system. I didn't really know that, so I did a bunch of research, found something on Amazon that I thought would work, crossed my fingers and ordered it, and it works just fine. So having used it for an entire project now, I'm really happy with this whole welding tool setup. My shielding gas, my air compressor's over there. I have to hook that up to this for the plasma cutter portion of it, and I have a quick coupler on the back here at the regulator for that. But speaking of the plasma torch, that's going to be the first thing that we do, is do a little bit of cutting. This right here is something I salvaged out of my grandpa's barn. It's a whole bunch of heavy steel that I actually had to use the tractor to move it in here. It weighs so much. I don't know what he used it for other than some kind of organization, but it's stout, and he had 3 of them. And on this side, I've actually used a angle grinder with a cutoff wheel to cut these off in the past. And man, is that just a miserable chore. It takes forever, it's stinky, it's dirty. Then yesterday, when I was building the first stand, I cut off a couple of them with the plasma cutter, learning how to use that tool, and that was so much easier. So the first thing we're going to do is, I think we're going to cut all of these off just so I'm done with it, and then I can store it flat and it takes up less space, and I can move them around one sheet at a time. But then we'll end up cutting out a smaller chunk of this to make the base of that. But we're going to start by cutting this thing down into manageable pieces. Yeah. I also just quick wanted to point out that this thing will run on 110 or 220. All you have to do is plug in this little adapter pigtail. Because I'm already wired for 220, we're just going to go with all of the power and not limit ourselves here. But plug that in, turn it on. We'll hook up our hair hose. And then this thing goes through a boot up sequence. Got a little protective cover that I have no fingernails to grab with. There we go. We'll go home. We will turn it to plasma. And I like those settings good enough to start with at least, and we'll see what we can get done here. So the other thing before I get started is I need to ground it, and it's showing me it needs to be on the ground plug. So right now I have it on the negative, which is where it was for wire feed. So I can just take this plug out, move it over to the ground plug. Then we will clamp that on there and we should be good to go. Take a quick look at this. First of all, I actually have some clear rubber hose around the end of it that keeps the carbon fiber from rubbing on the metal and causing problems to the limbs. But I have just these little nubs on the ends. On the last round, I actually cut these at a 45 and welded them and then ground it back to kind of nice. And that was more work than it was worth. Part of the time I'm looking at this thinking those nubs are unnecessary anyway. There's not a lot of reason for this to move laterally unless you're holding it. So it's not necessary, but I'm going to do it anyway. But this time, rather than cutting 45s and trying to deal with really little pieces, this is the standoff that I need, and then this is going to be the nub. But it's so hard to hold a piece that's that little. I have that on backwards. I need to shift this so that this one is down. I need to pull this over. Come on. The magnet's too tough. This side is correct. So this is the arm, and then this is the nub. And it's too hard to deal with itty-bitty pieces like that, so I'm going to weld it this way, and then I'm going to cut off all but the last ½ inch or so that sticks up above that arm. But it's time to fire up the welder. There, so now we have the two cross arms welded on there with a lot of extra, so we can go nip this off right about there and then grind this to make it a little bit nicer looking, because I don't know the right way to weld that tiny weird little corner and make it look really nice without some grinding. Well, we got it all welded up and all this stuff ground nice, and I'm pretty happy. I also took the other one, which is a little bit taller, and I cut the base that was a little bit wider off. This is a 13-inch base that was 16, so I cut 3 inches around, 1.5 inches off of each side, and cut that down to about the same size. So they're similar, this is just a little taller, and I wanted to repaint it. I asked my kids what colors they wanted, and our local hardware store did not have those colors. So we went with fluorescent green and fluorescent, this is red orange. If they don't look good, we'll paint them again another time. Good morning, guys. That paint has dried overnight and I'm itchy to do a little bit of shooting this morning. I figured first thing I need to do is pad those cross arms where those risers go on. So the easiest way I found to do that is to take your tubing. This is 1/2 inch inside diameter, 5/8 outside diameter, just rubber hose. And I'm gonna mark kind of how long I need these pieces, and this doesn't need to be too perfect yet. 6 and 7, and so the trick here is I found a dowel that fits inside there, and that makes it straight instead of, it's got some memory and tries to be curled like this. That's hard to fight with. I don't want to deal with that. So I know I need at least this much, and actually I need another 7-inch one because my dowel's not that long. All I'm going to do is get started here and pull that dowel with the tube around it down the length of my knife. Oh, I'm turning a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, but this is way better. If I tried to cut straight down this floppy hose, it would be all over the place. So that went from started there and ended there. I twisted a little bit, but it's not bad. And now you can open that up and get it over that piece of rebar. I kind of like the clear tubing because then I can still see my bright, colorful rebar underneath it. But I also thought about using like Flex Seal. I've never actually played with Flex Seal. I assume it comes out being kind of rubbery, and that would be nice on here. The one spot of concern is the tips here. If you're being real aggressive slamming your bow off and on there, you could maybe catch your carbon on that. So if I did Flex Seal, or there's a product called Plasti Dip. It's for like dipping the pliers, the handles of your pliers and stuff into it to give them grip. That's where that texture comes from. I thought about taking some of that and dipping these in there, and then I would actually, soften the corners too. But then that is a solid color. It is something else entirely, which could look okay. If I had black arms on this, that wouldn't be a bad deal. But the end is I couldn't find any, so I didn't do it. It was hard to do, so I gave up. There. Looks nice. That'll kind of, if I leave this out in the sun, that'll soften and learn how to wrap around there better. I might even take a zip tie on either end and hold it just long enough to get it to kind of remember its position there. Once it's, like that earlier I talked about the memory that this stuff has that kind of kept it curled up. If I zip tie that down for a little bit and let it sit in the sun, it'll get a new memory. All right, guys, let's try to wrap this up. It's actually harvest season around here, so there's combines and tractors everywhere, and the neighbor's grain operation is running at maximum decibels. So hopefully the noise cancellation on the microphone works and we can get through the end of this thing. But anyway, here they are. They're done. They're great. I'm happy. I've been using them. This is the original. This is the modified one after I learned what I needed to learn. The only two major differences is this is about 4 inches shorter, I think. And then this cross arm, when I went to weld this in, instead of making perfect 90s, I actually dropped it about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, creating a little bit of a shoulder there so that if you have anything, binos, lanyard, whatever, that you wanted to hang from that, it can't accidentally slip off like it could on this shoulder over there. So I think that was a good improvement. And then the height is just, it makes it a little bit lighter. It makes it a little less top heavy. It's not top heavy at all, even in the tall version, but this is going to be more stable than this. If you would like to build one yourself, down in the description, there's just a quick list of materials, lengths, how you cut it, whatever, to make it exactly the way this is. If you want to modify it from this, that could get you started. Also in the description, huge thank you to Yes Welder. That's a great tool, and I can't wait to get to welding some more stuff. I'm going to weld some stands for some 3D targets and stuff later. But if you'd like to look into that, there's a link to that down below, and there's also a coupon code so you could save a little bit of money if you're looking at getting into welding like that. Also, at the beginning of the video, you probably saw that big orange and white target. That's a homemade target I built myself just about free. I had to spend a little bit of money on hardware, otherwise it was just scavenged materials. So I've got a couple of videos on how to make those. There's kind of a funny story between those two videos. But if you would like to see how I built that giant free-ish target, there's links to that video also. But that's about it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. It's time to go get practicing, launch some arrows, hit some targets. I think I'm sitting at about 70 from my target over there right now, so we might have to just launch one and see what we get. We'll see you next time, and good luck this fall. Hopefully you're all out hunting and have a good time. We'll see ya. 72 yards. We can probably make that happen. 1, 2. I shanked that one. Let's do a better job. I like that better. I think we went a little bit right, but I think we're up kind of in there.